So we've got our grounding in the kind of the science and the theory behind peer learning, and I'm really pleased now that we can also take a look at a case study of collaborative learning in action. What our next speaker doesn't know about customer service and operational performance is probably not worth knowing. He's had a varied and successful career covering all aspects from strategy to back office operations. But what we're hearing about today, and I'm really excited to hear about this, is his experience of finding innovation in unexpected places. Please give a warm welcome to Oke Eleazu.
Good morning. I think it's just still morning. Oh no, sorry. Good afternoon. Obviously, I'm between you and lunch, which I always think is the worst place to speak, so I'll try and keep it relatively brief. And after the incident with the banging mic, which did work, just to give you a start, I'll just do it from here, if that's okay. So, thanks for the introduction. Before I start, I think I should kind of point out, I'm going to talk about social learning, collaborative learning, probably at the back end of what I'm talking about. What I thought I should do is give you a journey of my thinking in getting to why this is such an important topic. Before I start, though, I must point out that I'm an alien. I know I don't look like one. Under this exterior, I am completely different. I'm probably completely different to most people in this room and a lot of people at this conference. I've never been to learning technologies before. I've never worked in L&D. I've never worked in HR. So I thought it would be useful. I think part of the reason I was asked to do this was to give a different perspective, which comes from much more from an operational perspective. So although I may not be a creator of content or courses, through the roles that I've done over the last 10 years, what I'll explain, I suppose I'm a mass buyer and consumer of content and learning and development. So I see it from the other side, and I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'm very critical about what I get and how I receive it, and we can touch about that and talk about it maybe later. So, me, I'm an alien. What have I done over the last 20 years? I started in financial services, worked for Legal & General, then moved to the Prudential, where I ended up being customer service and ops director, looking after 4,500 people, both in the UK and in India. I then moved on to work at Bupa, where I was customer service and ops director there, again looking after about 3,000 people. So lots of learning going on there. After I left Bupa, I started my own business, Think Outside In, which I still do, where I work with organisations to help them improve their customer service and customer experience. And I'm also Vice President of the Institute of Customer Service. So I've been busy looking after lots of people and hopefully making our customers' lives better through management of people and how they execute their roles. Most recently and currently, I'm working with Sainsbury's, again, working on customer experience. And that's the big game in town because we employ 160,000 people. So that's all about trying to get your message and your learning across. So yeah, that's my experience. And I come at it, as I say, from very much a user's perspective. Now, the biggest dilemma for any sort of operations or customer service director is always the same, and it's probably the same for you as well, so anyone who's running an operation, which is always a question, how can you do the same or better for less? How can you deliver great service or better service, but I'll tell you what, you're going to have less people, right? I'm sure that's something you're all accustomed to in the organisations you worked in, whether it's an operational element or even an L&D perspective. One of the big problems, and actually, one of the ways we deal with that, and I thought I'd give a quick operations 101 for those of you who aren't immersed in it, is a model that I've kind of built over the last 10 years, which basically says it's kind of generally tends to be about unit costs. MDs are always coming to me and saying, okay, how can you reduce a unit cost? You've got this great big labour costs in your organisation generally, you're part of the organisation, how can you reduce it? And they always tend to talk to me about unit costs. So what they don't understand, sometimes, some of them, not all of them, is that unit costs are driven by lots of different factors. And actually, I thought it was interesting to look about how those affect the learning agenda. So I've got unit costs there. On the right-hand side, we've got transactions or units and transactions. And what I mean by that is often the way the world is changing, even though you might reduce the amount of policies or units or or things like that, actually the amount of transactions you do may increase because they access your organisation in lots of different ways. So people understand, well, we've got less policies, how comes you need more people? It's because the amount of transactions they do has gone up. Okay, so one of the ways to try and reduce unit cost is to try and reduce the amount of transactions you have per unit. And the way we tended to do that over the last 10 years is self-service. Okay, we tend to try and take out the easy stuff at an organisation and get customers to do it themselves. We do that because we say it's better for customers, which it is often, but it's often better for the organisation because it means that we can have less people. The flip side of that, from a learning perspective, that I've always encountered is you tend to take out the easy stuff, which only leaves the more complex stuff. Okay? So therefore, when you're trying to bring in new people to your organisation and train them and make them learn, you can't train them on the easy stuff you used to start on 15 years ago, because that's all gone. You know, that's all being done by computers or being done by customers themselves. So you're probably starting off at the midpoint, and that means you've got to kind of get them to the journey to competency is much more difficult because you start on more difficult stuff. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Middle section is around productivity, you can call it productivity or efficiency. So how can we get more stuff out of the same amount of people, or the same amount of stuff out of less people? One's called productivity, the other's called efficiency, same stuff, right? Again, over the last few years, I think where this leads you is to the whole agenda around multi-skilling. Okay, again, better for customers, it definitely is, but actually better for organisation. If you have 100 people that can do lots of different stuff, then you can utilise them in a much better way. It's much more flexible and makes you much more efficient and often makes you much more productive. Learning agenda, issue, you're trying to teach people a lot of different skills. So it's better for them, but it's a big agenda from a learning perspective to try and take on as an organisation, one that I've encountered a few times. And the left-hand side is effectively sourcing. So if you can do all of that stuff, great, but actually, we still want more. Well, the easiest way to do it, and I think you all know what's happened over the last 10 years. Anyone going to shout out what that's all about? Outsourcing. You know, actually, I know, we've got a great idea. We'll have the same amount of people, but just put them in a cheaper place. Right? Lift them, drop 1,000 jobs, stick them in India, or wherever you want to stick. So we're getting the same work, we're getting a lot cheaper. That works. And it does work. Learning agenda issue. How are you going to train 1,000 people in India on stuff that's been ingrained in the UK over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Huge challenge. So just a quick whistle-stop tour of the challenges that any ops director or customer service director faces and how that really faces into the learning agenda. And I'm sure most of you experienced it over the last few years. What's the issue with learning? And so when I talk about the learning agenda and the issue with it, it comes down to something that Herman Ebbinghaus said in the 1800s, I think, which is basically classroom training, although effective in some ways as they stand in the room or even lose the room, that learning decays ever so quickly. You know, so he said that 50% decay in the learning in an hour, and in a month 80% decay. Now, if you're trying to teach anybody anything with any complexity to then execute in a business environment with real customers, that is going to be a huge challenge. This is the challenge of workforces everywhere in the world, and one that's been a challenge for me for an awful long time. As I said, even though I wasn't in learning, I was in operations, and the amount of people I can get to competency is absolutely key, and this is a barrier to it. So, a few examples of where that's become an issue in the journey. When I was at Prudential, and Catherine can vouch for this because she was part of that journey too, we had a challenge of trying to put together 6 business service centres into one from all the different disciplines and crash them into one. We then had to close 3 offices to give us the cost reductions. Then we had to take out hundreds of lines and make them, well, actually the challenge was 1, we ended up with 6, which we were pretty happy with. And then, in addition, we've got another extra idea to layer on top of that. Whilst you're doing all of that stuff, why don't you lift and drop 1,000 jobs, you know, 10,000 miles away in a completely different country, in a completely different culture? Quite a challenge, but one we managed to achieve. But the biggest barrier to the achievement of it, absolutely, without aim, you know, it wasn't the buildings in India. it wasn't actually negotiating with the unions. It wasn't any of that stuff which was incredibly hard. What was really hard was actually getting the guys in India to be able to do the stuff we needed them to do. And back then, this was in the mid-2000s, we didn't really have lots and lots of e-learning. So it literally was physically flying people around the world to sit with people and mentor them and train them and sit them. A huge labour cost, absolutely incredible. So we had learning and we had traditional e-learning. And at that time, it dawned on me and I thought, actually, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way of doing this than literally flying, and I mean hundreds of people around the world to do this. And let me tell you, it wasn't really that effective. You know, and I think anyone who's dealt from a customer service perspective with lots of, I think it's much better now, but certainly back then, the service centres would vouch for that. So that kind of started me off on this whole, there's got to be a better way. When I joined Bupa, a different set of challenges, and it was all about, actually, although we've got a great service centre or call centre, how can we improve on it and reduce the cost by leveraging scale? This was a play that was all around multi-skilling. Okay, it was all about saying we've got lots of different pockets all around the country, different service centres. How can we bash them together, use less people, but still deliver this fabulous service that we're very famous for? And using that, we can improve our productivity. By the way, Oke, at the same time, we're going to put a new system in. So we have to teach all those people who you're cross-skilling a new system at the same time, a new operating system. So everything they know, or it will be what they knew, will be something in the past and we'll get to deliver something new. Again, exactly the same problem. Knowledge transfer. How are we going to do this? How are we going to get people who know stuff about corporate schemes to know about personal schemes and so on and so forth all around the country? How's that going to work? But by that point, actually, we'd moved on. We'd moved on in terms of, one, e-learning solutions. So we had a very well put together, well constructed, well executed e-learning strategy, which was good, great. So there wasn't so much flying people all over the world. People can sit at their desks and learn stuff, that's great. However, again, that wasn't still the perfect solution for us. Because you still suffer from this decay issue. You still suffer, no matter how good an e-learning package is, and you may want to debate this, no matter how good it is, sometimes people go back to their desks, they're under pressure, getting 50 or 60 calls a day on a massive amount of topics. They still need to try and reference stuff. So that was still a big issue. Luckily, for me, I was in Australia, I think in 2007, probably wrong, and whilst there, I was watching people doing a job in another health insurance company, and I found that what they were doing was accessing some sort of knowledge management system, which actually made me think, that's the answer. We can do e-learning, that's great, but where technology is going to take us is people to be able to access the information at their desk at their moment of need, on a call, quickly. Now, some of you will have heard about SharePoint, that's one way of doing it, and there are others, so I'm kind of provider agnostic, but the whole idea of knowledge management and knowledge solutions teamed up with e-learning will take you forward as a business. It allows you to get people competent quicker and allows you to offer greater service to your customers. So we did it. And we incorporated the knowledge solution to the e-learning solution, and hey presto, we ended up with much happier colleagues, much happier customers, much quicker time to competency. Because people didn't have to remember everything they learned in the course. They could relax in the course. They didn't have to remember everything, because what we ended up trying to do is not just trying to teach them everything, but tell them where to find it. So you teach them, but then you teach them where to find the answer when they don't know it. So as I said, all that quick access means that people can get what they want quickly for them and for customers, which was great. So thinking, wow, I've cracked it, this is great, but there's still an issue. There was still an issue to be resolved. And I can best articulate that by story. I was sitting with one of the call centre agents, and she was, like I used to do every week, and she was wrapping a call, and I noticed that she was able to finish the call and almost immediately start to take another call. And I'd never seen that, never seen it. So I said to her, well, how are you able to do that? She said, well, actually, I've been here a year, and I realised that this is what we were taught to do, and the e-learning taught us to do that, and so on and so forth, but I've found a better way myself. What I've done is I've created a spreadsheet here because I've realised 80% of the calls are kind of the same, and I created these codes. And what I do as I'm doing the calls, I cut and paste really quickly from there to there. And so by the time I finish the call, almost everything you need to know is I've already put it into the system, and I can immediately take another call. Well, I'm mind blown by this. You know, and she said, oh, and by the way, look, there's a chart of the best people's productivity in the whole business, and I'm at the top. Fabulous, you're at the top. How many other people know about this? She said, me, my friend Kate, and my friend Julie. I said, well, how come they know? Because I taught them. I thought, hang on a second. You found a way of cutting literally a minute off an average handle time of 6 minutes. By the way, I have 1,500 people who work in call centres, do the maths. You found a way of cutting a minute off that, and you've told Julie and Ruth, and that's it. I said, yeah. And we're top of the table, you know. And again, that made me think, hang on a second. There's something really wrong here. If I could execute what you've just told me across my whole organisation, I literally will save hundreds of people and millions of pounds for the business. And it kind of made me think, how much innovation is sitting and lying in the hands of people in organisations all around my business and every other business not being tapped into because there's no way of them getting that information across, you know. So knowledge management is good, but it's structured. Okay, it's very structured. It's still us telling staff colleagues what they need to know. But funnily enough, they kind of know it already. And they'll find a better way of getting a solution. Innovation is best created by those who know it. We've got to give them a way of creating content, and we've got to give them a way of sharing it with relevant members of staff, relevant communities. So I kind of think of knowledge management as more like Google. I can find what I want, but it's structured. But there needs to be something that's more like, say, YouTube, where people are creating content and sharing it with the relevant people so that they can all improve what they need to do. So, the end of the journey. When I started consulting with businesses about how to improve customer experience, this is something I used to talk to them all about. We need to go and find solutions. We need to find a solution to this problem. Once we do, we'll have almost cracked it because I've kind of done traditional learning, through e-learning, through knowledge management, and this is the last frontier. This frontier about peer-to-peer, knowledge solutions and innovation has got to be the place where we go. It's got to be the place where we improve things. At the same time, I started working with some guys from a company called Fusion Universal, mainly on a social enterprise about how we could work together to educate kids in Africa. And the way we originally tried to do that was by creating videos and content in a structured way. We felt in order to do it in volume, we needed some sort of mechanism where not only could we create content, but content could be created by the best teachers, both in the UK and in Africa, and that content could be shared with the kids. And actually, then we thought we've got to find a way that maybe the best kids can create content to share with other kids on selected projects. So that was kind of where we started, and then created the platform that they use now to share that information. So it was out of need, really. It's kind of like Ben was saying, you block away and find a way around it, and that's this sort of hub and community-based learning was the way to crack it. And then through that, the thinking was, well, hang on, if this works for teaching kids maths, why doesn't it work for my call centre lady to be able to create very quickly a video of what she's done and share it with her community that might be a call centre community so that they can all do the same? So that's where we've got to. I mean, I'm product agnostic in a way, but I have worked with the guys from Fusion. They're downstairs in Fusion. I'm allowed to say that, apparently. They're downstairs, and you can go and see their platform, but there are others, many others who are doing this, okay, both free and paid for. I'd search them out because I really see the benefits of this as being what I've got on the slide. I think, rather than challenging traditional e-learning, I think the whole idea of social learning kind of supercharges it. You can imagine if someone does an e-learning course or even a traditional learning course, the ability to be in a community of people who've been on that course or ever taken that course and be able to talk to each other about what they felt about that course, what was good and what was bad, things they've done differently, I think is massive. The ability for the tutor to also interact with that community long after they've left either e-learning course or a traditional course, I think is pretty amazing. I think collaborative innovation, it will be key. So, say at Sainsbury's we have a fabulous suggestion scheme, has maybe 30,000 suggestions a year. The problem with that is that's one idea, and often what happens is one person comes up with an idea, they tell the assessor says, this probably won't work, thanks very much, here's your £10 voucher, or whatever the answer is. But in that idea is often a germ of something that's really amazing. It's just not been kicked around by enough people. And sometimes it fades. That's why I think some suggestion schemes don't work. And actually, if you did something which was saying, here's an idea, let's throw it into a pool where people can collaborate on that idea and take a bit down, add a bit, which will give you a solution that probably would work, I think is an amazing potential for systems like this. I've talked about experts creating content. Again, most trainers, in my experience, aren't the experts. The experts are often doing the job, okay? So why wouldn't I want the experts who are doing the job to have the ability to very easily create and share content? Best practice, I've kind of alluded to. People, they do their job, they create best practice. We want a way of sharing that to make the organisation move faster. Learning communities, Donald talked about, in terms of people learn in groups and they share stuff in groups and they want to learn from each other in groups. How can we find a really fabulous way of facilitating that technologically for the benefit of the individuals and for the benefit of the organisation? Criminalise the stop. When I've spoken about this before, people said, oh, there's going to be loads of junk that goes on there, so on and so forth. And that may well be the case. And actually, I've been, do you moderate, do you not moderate? But on whether you choose to or not, it would be up to the individual organisation. But what I think is important is once you allow people to rate or to, by the amount of views, say something is good, or to comment, the cream will always rise to the top. The best video, the best explanation, judged by the people who use it, will become the most used. And therefore, even if you have a lot of stuff, the best stuff, the cream, will always rise to the top. And we see that already in the way YouTube and many other social networking things work. So if it works there, why wouldn't it work in a commercial environment? And the other thing to say is, I think it's simple and quick. The things that I disliked about some things around e-learning was how long it took to get stuff done, how long it took to create content, because there's lots of understanding what the expert knows, trying to put that in a different terminology, proofreading this, that and the other. I'm saying, why not let someone, like the lady I'm talking about, say, here's the thing, tell us about what you've done, show us how you did it, post it on a thing and share it with the community of people who did exactly the same job as you, okay? And let's see if they can knock a minute off their average handle time as well and save the company money and give greater service to customers, okay? So that's why I'm passionate about social learning. Totally from the other side, from the actually supply side, it's about the user side and what I think it could do for organisations, for colleagues and for customers. Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear any snores. I was very brave putting that up. But thanks for your time.